The ancient ritual of seppuku stands as one of history's most confronting examples of honor culture taken to its extreme. A samurai, dressed in ceremonial white robes, kneels silently on a straw mat. With unwavering resolve, he reaches for a short, razor-sharp blade. What follows is perhaps the most painful and deliberate form of suicide ever institutionalized by any culture. But why would elite warriors of feudal Japan choose such an agonizing end? What cultural forces created a system where disemboweling oneself became the ultimate expression of honor? And what can this ritual teach us about the complex psychology of shame, redemption, and the human capacity for enduring extreme suffering in the name of principle? The answers reveal much about not just Japanese history, but the universal human struggle with mortality and meaning. Feudal Japan's most misunderstood ritual wasn't just about death. It was about how one faced it. The ritual of seppuku began during Japan's tumultuous feudal period, around the 12th century, when the samurai warrior class rose to prominence. The word itself combines setsu, meaning to cut, and fuku, meaning abdomen, a literal description of the act. But this clinical terminology fails to capture the profound cultural significance behind it. For the samurai, the abdomen or hara was considered the seat of the soul and the source of one's true intentions. By exposing one's entrails, a warrior was literally revealing his spirit, proving he had nothing to hide. The origins of seppuku are somewhat obscure, but historical records suggest it evolved from battlefield suicides. A defeated samurai, rather than face capture or dishonor, would choose to end his life by his own hand. Over time, what began as a desperate battlefield act transformed into a highly formalized ritual with strict protocols. By the Edo period, from 1603 to 1868, seppuku had evolved into an elaborate ceremony with specific roles, clothing, and procedures. The ritual typically began with purification. The samurai would bathe, dress in white robes, the traditional color of death in Japanese culture, and often compose a death poem reflecting on life's impermanence. The location would be prepared with a small raised platform covered with a white cloth or tatami mat. The condemned would kneel in formal seiza position, the small table before him holding a tantu, a short blade specifically used for this purpose. What made seppuku unique among suicide methods was its deliberate painfulness and complexity. The samurai would plunge the blade into the left side of his abdomen, draw it across to the right, then turn it upward, creating a cross-shaped incision. In some cases, particularly formal ones, he would then slightly pull out his intestines. All of this was done while maintaining composure and dignity. Any display of pain was considered shameful. But perhaps the most misunderstood aspect of seppuku was that the samurai rarely completed the act alone. Standing behind him would be a kishakunin, a skilled swordsman, often a friend, whose duty was to prevent prolonged suffering by beheading the samurai with a single sword stroke at the moment of greatest agony. This was not an act of mercy, as outsiders might assume, but rather a final service ensuring the ritual was completed with proper form. The timing was crucial. Too early would rob the samurai of his demonstration of courage. Too late would subject him to undignified suffering. The kishakunin-esque skill was judged by his ability to leave a small strip of flesh at the front of the neck, so the head would fall forward naturally rather than rolling away, considered aesthetically important and more dignified. But why would anyone choose such a painful death? To understand seppuku, one must grasp the concept of bushido, the way of the warrior, the strict ethical code that governed samurai life. Bushido valued loyalty, honor, and personal courage above all else, including one's own life. In this value system, how one died was as important as how one lived. Samurai who committed some grave offense had essentially two choices: live with shame or die with honor. For many, the choice was clear. There were several situations that might call for seppuku. The most dramatic was junshi, following one's lord in death. When a daimyo died, his most loyal retainers would sometimes commit seppuku as the ultimate demonstration of fidelity. This practice became so common that it was eventually banned by the Tokugawa shogunate in 1663, as too many valuable warriors were being lost. Another form was kanchi, protest suicide. Samurai might commit seppuku to demonstrate the seriousness of his objections to a lord's decision or policy. This was considered the ultimate form of criticism. It showed the samurai was willing to sacrifice everything for his principles. God. But perhaps the most common form was for atonement. A samurai who had committed some grave error or brought shame upon himself would be granted the privilege of seppuku, rather than facing execution as a common criminal. This was considered an act of mercy, as it allowed the warrior to maintain his honor and determine the circumstances of his own death. Interestingly, seppuku could be either voluntary or obligatory. In some cases, it was officially mandated as a form of capital punishment that paradoxically preserved the condemned's honor. The samurai would receive a formal sentence, along with a ceremonial dagger, often wrapped in white paper. The receipt of this package was understood as an order to commit seppuku, though the condemned was sometimes permitted to choose the time and place. Perhaps the most famous historical example of seppuku was that of the 47 rōnin. After their lord was forced to commit seppuku for assaulting a court official in 1701, these masterless samurai spent 2 years planning revenge. They successfully assassinated the official responsible for their lord's death, then surrendered themselves to authorities. Their actions placed the shogunate in a difficult position. The rōnin had fulfilled their obligation of loyalty, yet it also disturbed the peace of the realm, as a compromise that recognized both their crime and their honor. They were sentenced to commit seppuku rather than face execution as common criminals. Their story became one of Japan's most celebrated tales of samurai loyalty. Another notable historical figure who committed seppuku was the poet and samurai Minamoto no Yorimasa. After defeat at the Battle of Uji in 1180, the 75-year-old warrior composed a death poem, then plunged his tantu into his stomach. His poem reads, "Like a rotten log, health buried and they groaned. My life, which is not flowered, comes to this sad end." The psychological dimensions of seppuku are complex. For Westerners raised in cultures that generally view suicide as tragic or sinful, it can be difficult to comprehend a society that institutionalized and honored certain forms of self-destruction. Yet within the samurai value system, seppuku represented the ultimate assertion of moral agency. By choosing the time, place, and manner of death, the samurai maintained control over his fate in a way that execution would deny. Moreover, the extreme pain of the ritual was not incidental, but essential to its meaning. The willingness to endure such suffering demonstrated sincerity and courage, qualities highly prized in Bushido. The public nature of many seppuku ceremonies also served important social functions. It provided a ritual cleansing of shame, restoring the samurai's honor and, by extension, that of his family. It also served as a powerful demonstration of the Bushido values for others to witness and internalize. As Japan modernized during the Meiji Restoration in the late 19th century, seppuku gradually declined as an official practice. The last formal seppuku as a judicial punishment occurred in 1873. However, the cultural ideal persisted well into the 20th century. Perhaps the most famous modern example was that of the writer Yukio Mishima, who committed seppuku in 1970 after a failed coup attempt aimed at restoring imperial rule. His highly public death shocked modern Japan and the world, demonstrating the enduring psychological power of this ancient ritual. Today, seppuku exists primarily in historical accounts, samurai films, and cultural memory, rather than as a living practice. Yet its legacy continues to influence Japanese concepts of honor, duty, and the proper way to face adversity. The willingness to sacrifice oneself for principle remains a powerful ideal, even if its most extreme expression has been abandoned. For the modern observer, seppuku presents profound questions about cultural relativism, the nature of honor, and the lengths to which humans will go to maintain their sense of moral integrity. It challenges us to consider how our own cultures shape our understanding of concepts like dignity, shame, and the meaning of a good death. While we may find the practice disturbing or even horrifying from our contemporary perspective, understanding seppuku on its own terms provides insight into a value system where personal honor transcended even the most basic instinct for self-preservation. In a world increasingly dominated by individualism and self-interest, there is something both alien and compelling about a cultural practice that placed collective values and personal honor above all else, even life itself. The ritual of seppuku, in all its brutal intensity, stands as a stark reminder of how different human societies can be in their most fundamental values. while also revealing the universal human concern with dying in a manner consistent with how one has lived. If you found this exploration of one of Japan history's most misunderstood rituals enlightening, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell. Your support allows us to continue bringing you these deep dives into Japan history's most fascinating cultural practices. Thank you for watching.